Brilliant. Finally, we got here. Welcome, everybody. Well, starting from the beginning, the reason why you are all here, I started thinking about doing this about 30 years ago. And it's taken me 30 years to collect the information, to do all the learning, all the research, working with children, and collect and even finding the experts who will help you in resolving the problems that a lot of you are now experiencing. And I've had to go through a journey where I had my own children and I had to understand from birth up to 16, because I taught children from 3 to 16, and I've seen the whole life cycle of a child through school. So today, this is about helping parents to understand what's happening, and you might be a bit surprised by what comes across in this summit, because things really are not what they seem. So before we start and before I bring my fabulous experts online, I wanted to just share with you a story of mine. You might be, there we go. Hopefully you can see that. So this time, this time of year, when I was 8, I actually finished school when it was spring bank, and I was going home with something in my bag that I really didn't want to show my parents, because when I was a child, school was difficult, shall we put it that way? And I had my report card in my bag, and I dreaded taking my report card home every single time it had to be taken home. So 3 times a year, we had the full report that went home, and then every half term, we had a report card, and mine were atrocious. So my grades were shockingly bad, and my father really was not happy with me. So the reason for that was when I was in school, I used to sit there with all the children in my class, and I went to an all-girls school, and I used to look around the room, and all the girls were sitting there writing, and I'd look and I'd think, what are they doing? What are they writing? How do they even know what to write? And my teachers actually said that I had a sieve for a brain, because information went in and information just came out. Nothing stayed in. And I was a chronic daydreamer as a result, because I just couldn't access what was happening. I didn't understand what was happening. And I really, really struggled in school. And then the reason this was so painful for me was because my parents came from Bangladesh. They were teenagers when they came, and they answered to adverts that were out at the time, and they came over to the UK in the 60s to work in the factories. So my dad worked in a glass factory. He worked in lots of different places. My mum did sewing, and they worked with really long hours, 16, 17 hours for very little pay. But over the years, they built up a small amount of money, and they pooled together with some of their friends, and they bought a restaurant. And in the next 2 decades, they actually had 6 children. I was the eldest, and they put all of us through private school. So that's how successful they were. So my parents were very, very insistent that we did well in school. And the reason being that in Bangladesh, it's a very poor country. And even now, children don't have compulsory education. There are 3 million, estimated 3 million children living in the streets, and they're in the labor force, and they start from as young as 5 years old. So the contrast between the privileges that I had, that my parents gave me, to the life that they had, and you know that really didn't gel well with them, and they knew if you didn't get an education, you literally ended up on the streets. So they were adamant that I did well in school, but I couldn't do it. I could not meet expectations. So there was a lot of pressure put on me from a young age, and my brain just didn't work. I did not understand why. My parents paid for a school education, they paid for tuition, which I had tuition for years, and they expected success. My father thought, well, if he paid for my education, I would be bright. That didn't happen. And every year, every term, it was a source of agony for me. Then, and the reason for that was something that a lot of people don't understand. Because when I was born, my parents actually did not speak English. I did not speak English until I was 4 years old because my parents didn't speak English at home. My parents' English was broken. So, given the fact that they had so much success, is a testament to how hard they worked. And because I couldn't speak English and I went to school, my development was delayed, my communication skills were delayed, my social skills were delayed, and I kept myself to myself a lot of the time. And it came to a point where a teacher actually said to my parents, you need to speak in English to Sabina at home because she's really struggling in school. So my mum then enrolled into college to learn to speak English, and then she would come home, and I was like her talking partner. And she used to then teach me how to speak and then teach me how to read. It was all broken English, but at the time, that's all I needed. But because I had such a delayed development, it then had a knock-on effect all the way through school. And on top of that, I only learnt this recently, but a few years ago, I realized that I actually have ADHD. And that explained my forgetfulness, my lack of focus, and there literally being nothing in my head. So back then, nobody knew anything about ADHD. There was no labels, and I was pretty much labeled stupid because I was a daydreamer, I forgot things, and I drifted. But then my siblings came along, and that's when things changed for me because they were the clever ones. And my parents then gave their focus to them. And when they did that, the pressure came off me. And funnily enough, a few years later, I actually got myself an engineering degree. I went on and got a teaching qualification. I got a master's in psychology. I got diplomas in child development, SEND, neuroplasticity. I now have more letters after my name than the dictionary. And it, and I have worked now for 30 years with children, and I have seen children in school struggle the way I've struggled. And this isn't to impress you to say, oh, I've got all of these qualifications. It's to make you understand something because this taught me a very valuable lesson. And that is one of the reasons I really desperately wanted to set up this summit for you. So the reason that I learned from the research was that a child's brain is not fully developed until they're 25 years old. And even though I struggled through primary school, and I know a lot of children struggle through primary school, it's because your brain isn't fully developed. It's continually developing. Now, I was pretty much written off by a lot of people because I could not do the work I needed to do. But I was one of those children that was a slow learner. Not everybody learns at the same pace. So the best analogy that I can give you is some children are like cars. They go from 0 to 60 in seconds. Other children are super fast. They're like motorbikes. But then there are other children who need a long runway. We're really slow. But when we lift off, we go even further. And that is what happened with me. And that's what I see in schools now. But the problem is, schools aren't built for planes like us. They're built for the cars. And when a child doesn't meet their targets, when they don't meet the tick boxes and the criteria, a lot of children are left feeling deflated, like they can't do anything. And that's the problems that we're now seeing in schools. It's been going on for years, but there's now research into all of this that shows that some children are just late developers. So Albert Einstein is actually autistic. He was terrible in school. Steve Jobs, dyslexic. Elon Musk, autistic. Richard Branson, dyslexic. Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Richard Branson are billionaires. They were slow learners. They needed a long runway, just like I needed a long runway. And when we try and compare children to other children, we do them a disservice. So I understand that there are a lot of parents out there who've gone through the schooling system, like I went through the schooling system, who didn't do well and they were written off, and they have anxieties and problems about school and even anger towards school because school isn't built for every single child, and parents need to understand that. So what I want you to remember is all children are not the same. Those struggling in school, it doesn't mean that they won't succeed. It just means that their brain is developing slower than some other children. And school doesn't suit all children. I found that out myself because I actually had to pull my own daughter out of school to home educate her. She suffered similar problems to the ones I had, and she also has ADHD. And she's thriving and doing so much better now at home than she ever did in school. In school, she actually regressed. So sometimes, even though a child takes longer in school, they can later on, they will go much further. And parents are so important in this process because if it hadn't been for my parents, they did everything for me, but they did one thing that a lot of parents don't do, and that is they set the bar high, they set their standards. And even though they took the pressure off in the end, they never let the standards slip. So what happened was when my brain finally caught up, I still had that expectation to do well, to meet my parents' expectations, because coming from Bangladesh, a child couldn't not have education. So they were adamant, whatever happened, I was going to get an education. And eventually I did. What I see these days is parents look at their children and think, they can't do well, they can't do maths, they can't do English. Oh, that's just the way they are. No, because if you give that impression to your child that they can't do it when their brain isn't fully developed, what are you actually telling them? So, what a parent thinks about their child has a huge impact on their future. So, if you believe that your child will do well and they can do well, they'll actually surprise you. If there are the Elon Musk and the Richard Bransons of life and Steve Jobs of life who can actually have a success, then other children can do the same. It's just a case of making sure that you're there to support them. So the words parents say to their children matters. The expectations you have of your children matters. The belief you have of your children matters. And equally, if you think that your child isn't going to do well, then that's a belief your child will take on too until they get older. So I created this summit because you as a parent matter, your opinion matters, and you deserve to have access to the knowledge that other professionals receive. And that's why I've set up the Prepared Parent Summit, because now's the time that parents really are crying out for the information that will make a difference to their children's lives. So that's me pretty much in a nutshell. And so the next 3 days, we are going to look at or listen to 6 fabulous speakers who will hopefully change your perspective on different aspects of your child's life and help you to understand what it is that you need to do as a parent and to then make those changes in your child's life so that they can be successful. because we have some serious problems in schools at the moment, and we can't resolve those problems alone. We need parents on board, but parents are the only group of people who get no training, no information, and we're just leaving them to try and figure it out themselves, and it's really not good enough. So the first person that I would like to introduce to the stage is Natasha Grace, who is going to be talking about interior designing, sensory interior designing for your home, to set the scene, to create the atmosphere so that your child can get the best out of their education and life that they can. So if you can show some hearts in the comments, that would be fantastic. Natasha, would you like to share with us some of your experience on how you came to do what you're doing right now?